Yes, I am.
Yes, I know the basic outline of the movement and why it originated. I do not have sort of in-depth knowledge of the movement, but I definitely know sort of the cursory information.
Well, I know it's a movement to basically gain equality as far as like the exposure of human bodies go. I don't know how it started.
You know, the oversexualization and exploitation of women's bodies in general is problematic in our culture and our media for sure. And it's something that I know so many different activists in different ways are trying to sort of poke holes in the way that women are represented. And it's definitely a sort of more provocative way than we've seen in recent times to get at this topic. And it's interesting because certainly doing it in that way gets a lot of people's attention and gets a lot of people thinking about this topic in general.
Sexual harassment on the streets a lot, like if women or females choose to free their nipples.
I think on a small scale, the biggest implication will probably have a large sexual focus, but like in the grander scheme of things and with its ripple effects, I think it'll be more focused on just the equality piece and of accepting all humans.
That's a hard question to answer. I mean, certainly there's social and cultural movement and change over time, and it's hard to say how long something like that takes, right? It seems totally insane to think that 50 years ago interracial marriage was illegal, for instance, right? I mean, that seems beyond understanding at this point. You know, it seems beyond understanding that we do not have, you know, same-sex marriage equality, you know, until very recently in most places. So it's hard to imagine how long, you know, something like this would take, and if, you know, the female breast or the female nipple ever does sort of become a non-sexualized part of a woman's body. I don't know. It's a hard question to answer.
As a general populace, probably not very soon, but I do think it'll happen.
I think it'll be socially attainable in very recent years, but I don't think that everyone will view it as a social movement until far later. Like, I think for a lot of people it'll be more seen as like cool because it's radical or because it's challenging the norm, but in the future, in the more distant future, you'll be able to see like people who really believe in just viewing people equally and saying that this is okay.
I would say that'd probably be pretty varied. You know, I think that it's certainly separate from and very different than sort of, you know, things like La Leche League that promoted, you know, breastfeeding in public and things like that, right? And sort of trying to take back the idea of over-sexualizing women's breasts. People still have a problem with breastfeeding in public, right? People have a problem with all sorts of things. And it's sort of hard to separate all of these kinds of ideas from each other because in some ways they're connected, in some ways they're vastly, vastly different. I don't know.
Nonsense. Well, they don't like seeing ankles. They're not gonna like seeing nipples.
I think it all depends on the person. For most people, I think it'll probably be like a, whoa, this isn't cool, this is weird, this is not what I'm used to seeing. But as we get older, I think a lot of people in our generation are like totally cool with the idea of women being able to go bare-chested, and I think as we move along, like younger generations will start to just accept it more as fact. I actually think it's really interesting.
I think it's dumb, and also it's frustrating because then movies take that and they purposefully expose women's breasts, females' breasts, in order to get that audience to go see that.
I actually think it's really interesting because for a lot of little kids, like, you'll see your mother's bare chest just feeding you, so the fact that that's sexualized at such a young age, but a man's bare chest is seen as completely normal, even though there's no actual need to see that at a young age, it's a little different, it's a little weird.
I was aware of that, and I think it's very unfair.
I wasn't aware of that. I do think that's unfair. But I guess it just goes back to the whole issue of like society not at this point viewing men and women as being equals.